So, conference-driven publishing, the idea comes out of the idea of conference-driven development, which you might have heard people talk about over the last few years. The idea, in theory, goes like this. So you propose a talk about something really cool, but as yet unwritten. Time passes, stuff happens, and you give a talk, and everything goes absolutely wonderfully well. That's the theory. The practice is often slightly different. Step one is exactly the same. You propose a talk about something cool but unwritten. Lots of other stuff that doesn't really move the project forward happens. And you end up giving a talk which is about all the things that would have happened had all that other stuff not intervened. Conference-driven publishing, it turns out, is a lot like that. So, some of you would have been at the LBW last November. I was there, this is me, down here, giving a talk, a writing talk, in which I talked about writing a book about modern web programming in Perl. And this was my mistake. If I could go back in time and stop myself making any mistake ever, it would be this one. It would be take that slide out of the talk. So anyway, the next LBW is on the 12th of December, which is something kind of 2/3 of the way there. So how's it going? Well, okay, but what have I done? And actually, when I was doing these next few slides about what I actually have done, I impressed myself because I've done more than I thought I had. So I've got a website, but actually those of you that were at the talk will know that I actually got the domain. I'd owned the domain for about 5 years, so I've installed WordPress. So that's half an hour's work. I've got a Twitter account, but you can't see it, but the most recent tweet is actually on the day of the LBW, the last one. Although I think this happened afterwards, the icon, so that was another half hour's work. We've got a GitHub account, and there's files in the GitHub account. But then there's a plan of the topics that I'm going to write about. One of the things I'm most impressed about is there's a commit there from someone that's not me. So we have contributors. And actually, that's from David Dorwood, who was so fired up by my lightning talk that on the train home he wrote the bare bones of a chapter about how HTTP works. But again, that was on the day of the conference, so a long time ago. There is some text. I have written a couple of pieces of a couple of chapters. I've also done some thinking. The process of writing a book is important. Getting the right tools in place is important. So I had to come up with the idea. I had to decide what input format I was going to write, what I was going to actually write the book in, and then I wanted easy ways to convert my input format into EPUB, MOBI, and PDF, because that pretty much covers everyone. So there's a make file in there, because I'm old school and I use make files. I decided on Markdown as the format because it's shiny and cool and all the cool kids are using it. I found a thing called Paddock, which takes Markdown. I mean, it does many things, but one of the things it does is it takes Markdown and converts it to EPUB. There's a thing called KindleGen, which you can download from the Amazon website, and that, well, again, it converts from many formats, but I'm using it to convert from EPUB to MOBI. And then some of you may have seen a horrible-looking GUI for a program called Caliber. But one of the things it does is it converts from EPUB to PDF. And there's actually a command line tool, so you don't have to get involved in all the horrible Caliber GUI. So I've got this process in place in my main file. So I've got markdown files and I can convert them to EPUB, and then from EPUB I can build the other things that I want. So that's another couple of afternoons' work, getting that all up and running. But that all happened months ago. What have I been doing since then? Well, this is my kind of the dog ate my homework section of the talk. So you remember that slide, the what goes wrong in the practice of confidence-driven development. Well, that's kind of what happened to me. I went on holiday. That was nice. We had a general election at the start of the year, and I absolutely had to write a web app that was monitoring what politicians were saying in the run-up to the election. So that was basically January to May. Some of you, if you read my Perl blog, you'll have seen a few weeks ago I spent a weekend making this rather nice dashboard for my CPAN modules. Another blog post I wrote about how I took the code that I was using to run my business and put that up on GitHub. So that's the database diagram for that. People that have been talking to me on London PM have got involved in conversation about this application that I'm writing for my wife's school, which turns out there might actually be a business there. So that's nice. I'm preparing for Yaksha Europe. I'm writing talks and I'm practicing talks and stuff like that. Basically, I'm doing all sorts of things that aren't getting this bloody book ready. All in all, I'm procrastinating. But, you know, all is not lost. I still have 4 months. Don't give up on me yet. Well, I suppose I should say, if you see me at the LP. And if I'm smiling, then you'll know that things have gone reasonably well over the next 4 months. However, and this is my attempt to bat off all the criticism of my procrastination and push it back onto the audience. There's a big however. Do you remember that tool chain that I mentioned a few slides back? The one that was Markdown and Pandoc and Kindlegen and Calibre? The one that was this diagram? Well, that would work for you too. The large publishers out there have pretty much, as far as I can see, given up on publishing new Perl books. O'Reilly still update their classic Perl books every few years, although we seem to be overdue a new version of Learning Perl at the moment. And Rox did Ovid's Beginning Perl. Pat still churned out the same old shit. No Starch Press did that Perl one-liners book, but there's the big publishers aren't really producing new Perl books. That doesn't mean we have to stop writing them. Amazon makes it really easy to publish and sell books, and there are other places that you can do that, not necessarily Amazon. How about Perl books? Perl publishing as a cottage industry. Want to go out and write the books that you want to see, or perhaps persuade other people to write them. Buy them beer is normally the currency in the community. For example, there's a book out there called The Plank Handbook, where Miyagawa put together some articles, some of the pod from CPAN, and ran it through a process probably quite similar to mine, and produced an e-book. It's not on Amazon, but you can buy it from his website. You know, it's about $6 or $8 or something. Because one of the good things about e-books is that there's no minimum size. You don't have to write a huge, great tome. You can write an e-book that's only 50 or 100 pages, but as long as you price it right, people will still buy it. Is anyone else in the room old enough to remember this? Yeah. The Perl resource kit was a boxed set of Perl books that you could buy from Amazon from O'Reilly. I think that the Unix one came out in about 1997 or something like that. There was about 4 books in it, and I couldn't find any images of the books inside it, but one of them, or 2 of them, 2 volumes, basically they took the pod from CPAC and converted them into 2 books. Of course they were out of date by the time they got onto the bookshelves, but that's an idea. Does anyone else other than me have a copy of this? No. So about 6 years ago, Leon took all of the tutorial parts of the documentation for Moose and turned them into a real book, because he used a system called Lulu. Does anyone for creating real books? Sorry?
I think further books bought some copies of that.
Yes, I bought mine from him at Yapsy in Lisbon. So there's an idea. You can take stuff that's already out there and turn it into a book and pay for it. So you can show the publishers that people still want Perl books. Or alternatively, you can prove to yourself that people don't want Perl books, I suppose. After all, that is how 50 Shades of Grey got started, as an e-book. Not suggesting for a second that Perl books would sell, but maybe it had similar scenes. I read this last year, and it's available as an e-book from Amazon, and it's all about the other, tells you how to write a book, how to publish a book, and how to get out there and sell your book. So, this is a classic do as I say, not as I do moment. Don't procrastinate. Write a book. Next update in Granada in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. Thank you very much.